happening, folks. It's happening.
A moment of silence for democracy. Good evening and welcome to Late Night Review, where we talk about what's happening.
And what's not.
I'm Kate Salkowitz.
And I'm Mark Maelstrom. Melania Trump this week announced that her philanthropic focus as Donald Trump's First Lady would be on a nationwide anti-cyberbullying campaign. These efforts would be aided by the U.S. Department of Irony.
In an attempt to save face as much as possible in the final days of the election, aides to the Trump campaign have confiscated Trump's access points to his Twitter account, but assured him he could have it back as soon as he finishes his vegetables.
The Country Music Association is pushing back on reports it deleted social media posts about a performance by Beyonce and the Dixie Chicks at this week's CMA Awards after the show. So you're telling me that the Country Music Association used Beyonce for promos and ratings, and then erased all traces of her performance there afterwards? Sounds about right.
Amid all of the presidential election chaos, former GOP candidate Marco Rubio pulled out a victory for his Senate seat in his home state of Florida. Said the American public, "Oh my God, remember Marco Rubio?" In related news, other former GOP candidate Rand Paul also won his seat in the House of Representatives for his home state of Kentucky. Said the American people, "Wait, who the hell is Rand Paul?"
Newsweek has already started printing their post-election edition of the magazine with multiple covers in prep for the possible outcomes of each election, which means by this time next week, kids in Africa will be celebrating the election of President Gary Johnson.
On Good Morning America this morning, vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine called states like North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Ohio checkmate states, meaning that if he and Hillary could take one of them, they'd take the election. However, many American viewers could not understand this portion of the interview because the senator insisted on answering every single question in Spanish.
With Donald Trump overtaking Hillary Clinton's presumed lead, Americans from coast to coast are glued to their TV sets in disbelief, beginning to pray that the whole thing is an elaborate joke and that Anderson Cooper will suddenly turn to the camera and say, "Live from New York, it's Saturday night."
Eric Trump making headlines today when he posted an illegal ballot selfie after voting for his father. Even more alarming than the fact that he didn't know his actions were illegal is the fact that we have actual legislation in this country about ballot selfies.
While voting today, Donald Trump got caught sneaking a peek at his wife's ballot. In Trump's defense, he was just trying to make sure he got the answer right.
Well, we know that one person who will definitely be happy if Trump wins this election is HBO anchor John Oliver. Maybe John will not actually have to work for that Emmy next year again.
Tonight's the night. The ballots have been cast. The votes are being counted. Tomorrow will be a new day in America. A new president will be elected. And Jill Stein and Gary Johnson will return to hibernation for the next 4 years, waiting to poke their heads out and see if America is in store for 4 more years of terrible foreign policy or accusations that vaccines cause autism.
Many have suspected that Trump's leading motivation behind this campaign has been so that he can launch his own Trump TV network after the election. One can only assume that the channel plans to anchor its programming around 24/7 reruns of The Biggest Loser.
Getting a lot of attention on social media for her unapologetically conservative viewpoints, here's Tomi Lahren to give us her final thoughts.
It's time for final thoughts. I can't believe I came down to this liberal trash heap of a town for this either, but here I am. Well, here we are, folks. Many are calling it the end times, and I would have to agree. After a year and a half of lying, race baiting, and corrupted media, it all comes together now. The Democrats' calculated destruction of the Republican brand. The Clintons' money is even so far-reaching now that George R. R. Martin has been campaigning for the Queen of the Everglades. Yeah, George R. R. Martin, the Game of Thrones creator. You know, that story about prominent families hatching plots and disposing of anyone who gets in their way of absolute power. Sound familiar? Sure, a lot of people don't like this election's Joffrey, but at least Joffrey can keep his kingdom protected from those trying to break in. We all thought Rubio would be the nominee, but he ended up being Ned Stark and got his head chopped off after trying to take on Joffrey, so now we're stuck with him. And I know plenty of you are about to cry spoilers, but hey, don't get mad at me just because you're too lazy to read a book or watch TV. Those of you who are crying spoilers anyway are probably the same ones who are voting for this election's Daenerys Targaryen. Now, if you don't like Joffrey, I get it, but that doesn't mean you should vote for Daenerys. If she's elected, we'll all be forced into her army of slaves at some point or another. Those are my final thoughts from Dallas. Good night. Take care.
Tommy Laren, everybody. The Late Night Review. I'm Mark Maelstrom.
And I'm Kate Salkowitz.
Good night.
Good night.